How do you determine what books of the Bible you're going to preach through each year? That's a great question. Hi, this is Redeeming Life Q&A, and I'm Pastor Joe, and this is where I seek to answer the questions that you text into us here at the church. And that was the question that we received this week. How do you determine the books of the Bible that you're going to preach through? Well, believe it or not, we put a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of prayer into determining the books of the Bible that we preach each year. Late in the summer, early in the fall, our elders get together, Pastor Brian and I, and we sit down and we spend some time in prayer and seeking the Lord's guidance and His direction, and time talking through the different books of the Bible. We ask ourselves and we ask God, Lord, what would you have us preach? What would you have us shepherd your flock in this year? How would you have us lead your congregation? And then as we discuss the different books of the Bible, we come up with a series or multiple series, and we structure a sermon teaching plan that starts in January and goes all the way through December in the Christmas season. And so we divide up our different series and the books of the Bible that we want to discuss and examine that year. And we create little outlines for the entire year, all 52 Sundays. And then we type it all up, we print it out, and that's what we go with. That's what we run with. And you might be sitting here thinking, okay, well, if they put an entire sermon series together and they lock that in, does that mean we're committed? What if things change? What if things change in the world or things change in the church? Then what happens? Well, the short answer is things do change. I mean, the world is constantly changing around us and things are shifting and changing all the time. And if the Lord moves in a way that maybe we didn't expect or things change in the church, we want to be flexible. We want to be willing to move as the Spirit moves us. And there have been seasons and there have been times where Pastor Brian and I have met and said, you know what? We were going to discuss that book of the Bible. We were going to go through that series, but let's actually hold off. Let's shift things around. We feel the Lord leading us to maybe discuss this book instead or look at this series instead. And so there is some flexibility there. One of the other things that we really examine and think through is how we're going to preach through or how we're going to teach that book of the Bible. If you were with us when we were going through the book of Romans, then you might remember we actually looked at that book and studied that book for 52 weeks. 52 weeks. It was a rich book, and there was a lot to cover there. Now, we didn't do 52 weeks in one setting. We actually broke that book up and that series up. We took some breaks and looked at some other things and kind of broke that up. And right now we're going to do the same thing with the book of Acts. If you've been worshiping with us here recently, then you know we've been going through the book of Acts. We started in chapter 13 and we're going through chapter 20 as we look at when the gospel goes. And we've been examining and looking at Paul's missionary journeys there in the book of Acts. And as we wrap that up here in a couple of weeks, we're actually going to take a break. We're going to go through the commands of Christ and look at what it means to be a Jesus follower and the commands that he's given us as followers of Christ. Then we're going to dive back into the book of Acts later on. We're actually going to look at the seeds of the church and see how the early church started by starting in chapter 1 and going through those first few chapters and see how the church grew and flourished after Christ's ascension. And so between this year and next year, we're going to go through the entire book of Acts, as well as some other books of the Bible. So while we put a lot of thought into how we structure our series, there is some flexibility there too, but we spend a lot of time working on prayer and different things like that to really discuss and figure out how God would have us lead His church and what books of the Bible we'd preach through that year. That was a great question, and I'm so glad you asked it. If you have a question for us here at Redeeming Life Church, you can text our church cell phone line at 385-368-6665. Until next time.